Hello, thank you very much for coming to do this interview with us today. My name is Anna Chapman and I'm Head of Service at London Stadium Learning, and we're running a project called Passing the Flame. It's all about capturing the stories and looking at the memorabilia and the history of GB athletes who've represented at Olympics, Paralympics, worldwide events and international competitions. And I hear that you're very important people from 2012. If not from way back before as well. So if you could just tell us what your roles were during 2012, please.
Yes. So my name's Simon Wright, and I was on the hammer team. So during the Olympics, we were divided up into teams by field event. So I was part of the hammer team, although we did occasionally do other things.
My name's Kevin Diedrick. I was allocated the shot put. So we covered the men's and women's other events in the combined events, and we also did other duties like perimeter security, make sure nothing got into the infield that wasn't allowed.
My name's Jackie Wright. I was a games maker at the Olympics as an official capacity, and I was on the medal ceremony team in the main Olympics, and in the Paris we were just athlete seating and to help the officials.
Thank you. And so you're part of this club here, so what's your history with Woodford Green Athletics Club?
Well, Kevin should go first because he's been here longer than any of us. Yeah, he was here before James.
Before James?
I think so.
No.
I joined in '96.
Oh, that's true.
Because
Correction.
my son
Correction.
came down here at age 10 to have a go at seeing what he could
Which is
do.
29 years ago.
29 years ago.
Goodness me.
And he started out as a cross country and wasn't very good at that, and ended up an international decathlete, and he was homegrown from Woodford, and he's competed in nearly every Woodford event that there has been from the British League, young athletes, and competed internationally abroad.
So were you all athletes? Have you all come from an athletic background?
No, not at all.
I'm a long distance runner. I joined the club after doing my second marathon in '96, which I'd done to raise money for charity after my mother-in-law died. So I then come down, got involved in running the bar, and then one day an elderly official at the club, national official at the time, come up and said to me, "Do you want to start raking the sandpit for a kids meeting?" And as I say, that's what got me hooked into officiating, and I've been qualified since 1999.
Wow, that's incredible. So what happened in leading up to 2012 then? When did you get the call up, or did you have to apply? Was there an advert?
So the process was, you got an invitation. You essentially got an email saying, "Would you be interested?" So you had to reply yes or no, and I guess if you didn't reply, it was deemed a no. And then they did a selection from that. But in my case, about 2 years before that, people started nagging me to go for the next level of qualification because it would make me eligible. And I'm going, no, they won't pick me, they won't do that. So I had two people to thank for that. One's Keith Davis, and one's a guy called Chris Dowsett from Chelmsford, who was county secretary at the time, and badgered me at every meeting I saw him to go on and get the next level of qualification, which Jackie and I did together. And then, so we then said yes, and I got picked.
Well, my story is the day after we got the Olympics, and I said to people at work, I'm going to get up to the grade they need so I can be officiating at the Olympics, and never anticipated him being picked, a bit like Simon. And when you got the selection email, you was kind of over the moon, and work made a big thing about it, so they gave me all the time off special leave, which is unheard of really. And then they also, for the Paralympics, they let me build up some flexi credit, and also gave me some special leave to allow me to officiate at both games.
That's fantastic, isn't it? So did you choose the sports, or were you designated them, or your particular areas that you were given? Are you officials in all sports?
No,
We're officials in all field events.
Events.
Yeah.
All.
So we only do athletics.
Yes.
So, but being a field official
Yeah.
in Britain, you're qualified in all field events.
Okay.
So that's all 8 of them.
Which is different to overseas.
Yes, it's very different to many countries overseas. So the 3 of us, as it happened, went to the Invictus Games in Toronto as volunteers. And when we got there, we put down what our qualifications were, and they said, "Oh yeah, we'd be interested. Please come over." So we were over there, and when we got there, Kevin was chief of one of the, was it shot put or discus?
Shot put.
Shot put. And Jackie was chiefing the seated shot put.
Yeah.
And they said, since you said you were a referee, you can do all the track. I went, no, you've got a mistake. I don't do track. He said, but you said referee. And so we then started to understand the complete difference in qualifications. So I ended up helping one of the other discus. And what they do in Canada is they have 4 officials and 4 helpers. And the people who were helping, the officials who were there, were, it turned out, only qualified in horizontal jumps. They hadn't got any qualification in throws. They managed to roust a few people together to help. So it was like, wow, this is just like a complete different world, in terms of qualifications. And when we did the Olympics here, one of the things that happened just before the Olympics was that the IAAF, as it was then, World Athletics now, recognised British level qualifications at level 4 as being the equivalent of IAAF level 1 exams. So we sort of came the highest qualified officials in the world, who were not ITOs or ATOs. But they recognised that we were qualified across the board and we could do anything, which is true. You're taught to do any event and any duty in any event, and the same is true for track, and the same is true for photo finish. Within those disciplines, you do whatever's necessary. So,
because as I say, I worked overseas on a couple of major meetings, European Championships and the World Championships in Gothenburg and Berlin as a contractor, and the officials there, they either just put the cone in and out of the circle for the shot put, or raked the sandpit, and that was all they did on an event. So we're kind of different here because we feel our officials have got more rounded experience and are better able to interpret the rules across all 8 field events rather than just one particular element or one particular field event, which is what they do, especially in continental Europe.
It's an eye-opener, isn't it? I mean, going to Toronto as volunteers and then going, oh, you're suddenly chiefing it, and you're thinking, okay, well we
only came to help.
We only came to help. And then when you realise that the people that were under you, that they didn't know anything about throws and they didn't know how to judge lifting or anything. And of course, when you've got soldiers that have got no legs, and they're going, well, how can you do that? And I said, well, you just have to make sure that their stumps and whatever else is left on the chair has to stay on the chair. It can't be lifted. But it was an eye-opener for us to
certainly was,
to actually see that, hang on, you've gone abroad and they put us in charge, and we felt awful because all these officials were sort of looking at these strange 3 from England. And because we've done it before though, because the Invictus Games here, when it was first here with Harry and Wills, it was great fun. It was, but I enjoy doing the Invictus Games better than I have done even at the Olympics.
Kind of felt it more rewarding.
It was more rewarding.
Because of helping people who were using athletics as a development for themselves, but rather than just doing it because they want to compete, they're doing it as part of a health program in effect, and it's very rewarding to do it. So.
But I like the Paralympics better than I did the able-bodied because I feel they've got a lot to contend with, and they're not recognised for what they do. And when a lot of Paralympians came into the stadium and they looked up and went, is there going to be anybody in the crowd? And we went, oh, it's going to be full. And speaking to a German competitor afterwards, she said, I could not believe it. I went in to throw the shot and I was cheered, and I looked around thinking, where am I? She said, because they normally go to meetings and there's one person there.
Oh, because
they're helpers.
for the Paralympics I was doing a long jump event, and I was with a colleague, we were raking the sandpit, and there's this young lady got on the runway, kind of got overawed with the crowd, and didn't move for her entire minute. She did not start her trial, so obviously she failed, purely because she froze, because they were not used to that kind of spectators in the stadium. Coach did have a go at her, and she didn't do it afterwards. But they didn't just cheer the Brits; they cheered everyone at the Paralympics. And like Jackie, I enjoyed the Paralympics a lot more than I did the Olympics. The Olympics were special; it's the pinnacle of track and field sport, as far as anyone's concerned. But the Paralympics is right up there.
So we'll start with Paralympics. So what are some of your really fond memories from the Paralympics, or maybe wow moments that you've taken away?
So the thing I marvelled at most, to put it that way, was watching the high jump for one-legged athletes. So and you just stand there watching, amazed that they can, they come in on crutches or even in a wheelchair, and then they manage to find a way to run up. I say run, maybe an overstatement, but to get to the bar and manage to vault, to jump higher than I can. Well, I'm no good anyway. I can hardly get over anything. But I mean, higher than lots of people can, and 1.50 metre or thereabouts.
Over my head, some of them.
Some of them, they were amazing, absolutely amazing. I couldn't believe it.
My memory is first time I'd ever done a blind event, which is in the Paralympics, and that was a triple jump. And I was amazed how the runners were aligned by their guides and then just listened to the rhythmic clapping, obviously total silence in the crowd, and the change in the clapping denoted how close they were getting to the takeoff point. And then once the clapping stopped, they would plant their foot, jump, and hopefully land in the sandpit. But yeah, that was absolutely amazing, because they can't see where they're going. So how do they know where to take off?
Yeah, big silent stickers going up too.
Really?
Oh yeah, the games. There were games makers.
Hear.
As soon as they were told, the crowd would stop. So the silent stickers would go up. Some of the games makers sitting at the front would put them up. The announcer would say, "Quiet in the crowd," and it would just go silent.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
But I've actually clapped for a blind long jumper, and it is amazing, because you have to get out the way at the right time, otherwise they take you out with them, because they can't see you. Obviously they can hear you and they know they're getting close, but you have to clap a certain way so they know when they're like 10 strides out, and then you have to get out of the way, and it's surprising how quick they come upon you, because you're trying to make the mark where you've got to get out of the way. And Finley said, "How do you do it?" I said, "Well, you just have to step sideways. Don't do anything else, just one step sideways, because if you turn, they might have turned towards you and you end up being taken out." But
Timing it right.
it is timing.
Wow.
But to me, I think what hit home to me was how advanced, like UK and America were for their wheelchairs and their prosthesis limbs, and they had a little room outside, so if anybody came from another country that didn't have proper prosthesis limbs, they would fix them, they would make them, and they would give them away. I can't remember what it was called.
I can tell you, it's a company called Otterbock.
Yes.
They were absolutely fantastic, but the trouble is, when they go back to their own country, like with a brand new wheelchair, what's going to happen over there? I mean, they couldn't believe it. They said, "Well, we've come with this wheelchair," because I was up with a lot of the athletes, and they said, "I don't know what's going to happen when I go home, because
there were
this is
definitely
more than I earn in a year."
There were definitely people there to use the wheelchair, use the racing chair, whatever, and then returned it. And they said, "There's no point in me taking it home. I'll get robbed as soon as I go back."
Yeah, but it was amazing to think that.
And they came with.
Britain, we'd done this, and to make them hopefully be on a level playing field.
Yeah. And they would, a lot of the seated throwers would come with their own chairs, which are like a metal frame, and sometimes they wouldn't quite conform to spec, or they would be a bit flaky, and the company were there with welding equipment, etc., to tart them up and help them fix them and make them work. So it was an amazing cooperation. I mean, it was all organised and etc., but it was an amazing level of cooperation from all sorts of people to help the thing go along. And what many people don't understand is what else happens behind the scenes. So, for example, every athlete who shows up at the Olympics can go and get a free eye test.
Yep.
My glasses, very similar to these, broke one day, and I didn't have a spare pair, and the eyepiece broke here, and it was sticking in my nose. So I went over to Specsavers in Stratford, and I said, I don't know if you can help me. I said, but can we do something to fix this, because I'm officiating this afternoon. I went, just a minute. Got a pair of them, gave me a brand new pair, just like that.
Wow, that's incredible.
He popped my lenses in their frame because they were the right spec, but there was, and the place was packed with athletes who were getting eye tests, who were coming from countries where there was virtually no, eye facility, and they were getting glasses and everything else. It was amazing.
The atmosphere was absolutely.
All this happens behind the scenes. Everybody thinks what you see on the television is it.
Oh no, there's
and
a lot behind.
It's like the tip of the iceberg.
So moving on to Olympics.
Sorry.
No, I don't want to move you on quicker at all. Yeah, the Olympics, same question for the Olympics. Really memorable moments.
Okay, I've got two. Am I allowed both?
Of course.
Okay, day one, first event, we had to do back-to-back hammers, 2 qualifying pools. So the first one, I'm sitting out there and it rained, and we got wet to the skin because we didn't take waterproofs out. We weren't expecting any rain. It was also the only rain we had in the whole of the Olympics. And then the second event, I'm sitting on the table doing the scoring, and the heptathlon high jump is going on behind me. So we've got Jess and 2 others who are all high jumping behind me. I'm being a good boy. I'm watching what I'm doing. I'm not looking at them, but I couldn't hear a thing. There was a guy next to me who was doing the scoring, and I couldn't shout at him to be heard. The noise level from the crowd, I could feel my internal organs vibrating with the volume of the sound. It was just amazing. Just every time I could tell who was jumping without looking round, just by the volume. Absolutely amazing. The crowd was so behind everybody. And the second big memory for me is there was a bit of a mix-up in the hammer for the ladies' hammer. So the electronic system stopped working a bit somehow, and so the hammer came out. The chap who was with me put the spike in, and I retrieved it to the side, and then he moved on, and the next hammer came out, and he was there, and I'm standing by the hole where the original one. I said, don't move, whatever you do, don't move. There's something gone wrong at the other end. They're still showing the scoreboard from the 2 before last, you see what I mean? So we stayed there, and then it all stopped, and we're waiting, and nothing's happening, and we're missing out on whatever was going on at the other end. So I said, what was his name? Jonathan Shaw. I said, Jonathan, have you got anything? Because we had nothing in our pockets. We were, going around empty pocketed, no wallets, no nothing. I said, have you got anything? He said, I'll put my watch in it. I said, put it in the hole to make sure we knew where that last hammer had landed. And he said, I've got a penny in my pocket. I just picked it up. We found it on the track. So we put this penny on the front edge of the hole, so we knew exactly where it was. And eventually, everything was moved on and resolved, and they reviewed all the video evidence, and they remeasured to that hole where we'd left the mark, and that became the bronze medal for Betty Heidler.
Oh my goodness.
And if we hadn't measured that, and they hadn't been able to redo that, that medal would have gone somewhere else. And only last year we were here at a competition, and somebody came up to me and shook my hand, and I went, he said, thank you for what you did. You made sure the medal went in the right place.
Wow.
And I was like, oh well, that's really nice. 9 years late, but really nice.
No one complained then that you'd been handy with the penny?
No.
I think we're building on to that ham story. I think there'd been a throw that was exactly the same distance.
Yeah,
before.
that was what triggered this issue. Was that the previous throw to Betty's turned out to be exactly the same distance. Well, Betty's was the same distance as that one. Hence, this threw people into confusion who thought this must have been a mistake in the readings, and yet it happens all the time. If you go back through the sequence of throws across the Olympics, you'll find it happened about 4 or 5 times. It's not uncommon, you know, particularly when they're all throwing roughly the same distance. So, you know. Anyway,
Well, my story is also from day one, because we was doing the qualification pool A of the men's shot put, and all of a sudden the heptathlon 100 metre hurdles were going, and all of a sudden the next heat waiting in the tunnel was Jess Ennis's one. So of course she came out, the crowd went into overdrive, and literally goosebumps come out on the back of my neck. All my hair was standing on end, and I was standing literally a foot away from someone who was spiking the event, and we couldn't hear each other, and they delayed our event while that race went, because the noise volume went up as the race went down the track. And that, to this day, that stays with me. You can't explain it unless you was there. It was just an atmosphere you can't repeat.
Thank you.
You can't. I mean, as a games maker at the games, doing the medal ceremonies was really great fun. But when you actually try, it lived with me for a long time. But it was like you'd have to go. We had this buggy, a golf buggy, which is what they thought I broke, but we weren't there. We were watching that day. But we used to have to go. It was like 200 to 400 metres to get the athletes from the warm-up track to get them to get their medals. So off you go in your buggies. And we had, at that time, friend Julie was with me at the time, 2 of us. And we had the medalist sitting on the back. And she put her foot on the accelerator, as a golf buggy does, it moves like this. So the silver medalist at the high jump lost his medal off the back. It was open and he was showing everybody. So the gold medalist went like that straight away, so not losing mine. Then we lost the athlete off the buggy to go and retrieve his medal. So we're thinking, how can we go back to this place and go, we've just lost a medal, can we have another one? But he said it's my fault. He said I was showing off with this medal, and he said I should know what these buggies are like. He said you were quite nice to take us back, so we took these guys back, and we nearly lost the medal and the medalist at the back. But I wasn't driving. It was Julie that was driving, and she's. But we had as games.
She's not with you right now.
No,
in your group, but we're going to speak to her.
Oh, she will probably bring this because she was driving at the time. But we also had Usain Bolt on the back, and Johan Blake, and he is a character. Johan Blake is really funny. I can't tell you any of the stories because that would be just wrong. What he got up to as an athlete, what he got up to out on the warm-up track. We had a rapport with a lot of the coaches, the Jamaican coach, because he was on crutches at the time, because he used to see us then with a buggy, and he used to go, taxi? And we used to take him on the buggy back to the stadium. And really you're not supposed to do that, because it's supposed to be for medalists only. But we weren't doing anything, and we got away with murder actually being games makers, and because these guys had to conform and behave where we didn't have to.
Most of the time.
We did most of the time.
Most of the time.
When we was out on the infield, we did behave ourselves, but we did have a laugh and a joke before the event started.
But not as much as us. We had a ball. We got to places.
Yeah, yes, maybe. But when you're on that event, because people used to say to me, said, "So did you watch the race around the track?" I'm saying, "Excuse me." I said, "I was just focused on what I was doing." Right, you've got all this noise going on behind you, and you just tunnel vision, and that's it. You just concentrate on what you're doing.
That's very true, and it's very true, and it's very true across lots of meetings. So you go to a meeting and you're doing whatever you're doing, and somebody will say, "Oh, did you see, for example, did you see Greg Rutherford?" I went, "Well, I must have done. I was on the long jump, but I never noticed." And you don't notice the people anymore, do you? They become just an athlete. You're doing the thing, you're measuring the distance in the sand, or you're looking at the feet for takeoff, whatever it is, and actually you no longer take any interest in the individual as a person. You don't recognise them as individual people. They are one of 8, 10, 12 athletes, whatever it might be. And a number of times I've come away from meetings and people said, "Oh, do you know? Did you see so and so there?"
No.
I probably, but I didn't notice.
But you do 13-year-olds and 8-year-olds exactly the same as you do with any other competitor. So you judge.
Yeah, we only have one set of rules.
Yeah, we have one set of
People
rules.
tend to forget that.
So we just, we judge the athletes whether they are 8 or they're 80, and I think we've done all of them. Even 90-year-olds we've judged.
Mary, 96.
I had to red flag her on the takeoff board on the long jump.
Yeah.
World record she was going for, about a metre and a bit. She went over the plasticine and I got booed.
Because another one of the things we had on our teams at the Olympics, we had some inexperienced officials, didn't we? Like level 3s under us, were there to get some exposure. So all the senior officials on the team were there to look after them, mentor them. And the first event we did, I think Aidan, who was only 18 at the time, was assigned to work the EDM, which measures the throws. And this international official came up, right pompous so-and-so, and he said to him, "Are you old enough to use that?" And he went, "Yeah." He says, "Do you know how to use it?" He went, "Yeah." He says, "No, I don't think you do." So obviously Aidan went out to do the check measures, and he came back and he went, "Oh, you do know what you're doing."
Yeah, you do get a few people who think that age is a barrier to knowing what to do.
So you must have become real experts in the sports that you had to cover and support.
So the way Jackie and I got into it was we were literally driving around the country taking James to events, and of course they're 2 days. So doing a decathlon is a 2-day meeting. So whilst he does 10 events, they don't take all that long, for him to do the individual things, and yet it takes us 2 days. So, after a while, we effectively kind of crossed the boundary and went and helped and just did the raking or whatever else it might be. And then the same as Kevin, we got roped into doing the field course here, and I'm still playing Don for that. So.
Raking a pit again. We got
and we had to sit classes, didn't we,
yes,
originally,
yeah.
and then a proper written exam before you could become this. Things have changed. It's much more. That was 20 years ago. So things now have changed to the point where it's much more experience based. So you do a course and then you go out and you try it, and you're as an assistant official, you're doing it out there and learning by doing, which is, I think, great. The other bit was really just to kind of instill the set of rules into your head by doing an exam. But the rules are not actually terribly complicated. I haven't actually counted them, but it's about 30 pages in the athletics rule book's like an inch thick. Field events are about 30 pages of that to cover all 8 events, and they're not very hard to learn or understand, and most of them are the same across multiple events. The funny ones are we do children's, young people's events. Other old age groups that I was thinking, and they'll do the high jump, and then they'll run to get off the bed because the teachers have told them, if you're off the bed before the bar falls off, it's okay. No, it's not. So we're always telling people, no, that's not the case. Apparently, once upon a time, it was in the school's rule book.
It was.
But it's long been dropped. So no, if it comes off, it's off. But the teachers still tell them. So.
But even some top athletes still go.
Oh.
And you think, no, it's not a rule.
That's my biggest bugbear. Athletes and coaches have never read the rule book. Well, honestly, that's true. Jess's coach, Tony Minicello, good friend of ours, said we posted him a rule book, didn't we? Because he and
we gave him the rule
he and
book.
Steve Backley do commentary on television, and we sent them a rule book to stop them making rules up on the radio. But I asked him at a meeting once, like a conference, and I said, well, when was the last time you read the rule book? Tony said, I've never read the rule book. And he was absolutely serious.
Wow.
But we get athletes who say, well, I didn't know that. Okay, well, you've only one person to blame, your coach. If he's teaching you how to run the event or jump this or jump that, he should also tell you the rules. So blame your coach.
Well, I was doing a high jump event in Glasgow, and Robbie got rats took his jump, clobbered the bar, and he was doing this, got off the bed quickly, and the commentator's going, oh, and that's a valid jump from Robbie Gobrats, he's clear. And I'm thinking, I haven't put my flag up yet.
Yeah, it's not happening
Still
yet.
wobbling.
It's still wobbling. So I got up, had a quick look to make sure the camera wasn't holding on, and then raised the white flag. I said, now it's a valid jump. So it's a case of Steve Cram's just as guilty as anyone else. He don't know the rules. Paula Radcliffe doesn't know the rules, and they're trying to talk about field stuff, and they really haven't got a clue. So I think they should be educated, do an officials course, so they know what we have to put up with when we're out there judging.
Do you ever feel really mean when you have to call a no jump?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you don't want
Especially
to.
if it's their third attempt as well.
Yeah.
In a heptathlon or a decathlon, and you're going, and you've just gone, no, that's a red flag, and it's. Kevin knows all about that, from my son.
Yes, I was judging him down here, and his first 2 throws were no throws.
Discus?
It was discus.
Yeah, what a surprise. He was always at throwing the discus in the cage.
And he managed to get one in just on the last throw, but yeah.
You
As I
did
say,
very good.
my closest no jump I've given was at the World Indoors, and I think it was this Portuguese athlete in the heptathlon come hurtling down the runway, planted her foot. I said, okay, that looks okay. And I'm thinking, yeah, the plasticine's fine. After she took off, I noticed a little nick in the plasticine, and up went the red flag. And I thought, oh God, I'm going to get it, I'm going to get it from the crowd. But I left it, took the thing out so she could see where the small nick was, and she just accepted it and walked away. But sometimes they do throw their toys out the pram and say, how's that a foul? I said, well, look at the big mark in the plasticine.
But now that's changed, isn't it? You don't have
Well,
you don't have a
yeah.
plasticine board now.
In terms of feeling mean to people, though, so, we all, the 3 of us, help out at sprints events around the Lee Valley and Chelmsford, and I'm doing the marksman at the start line, and so somebody does a full start, and the starter says, "What do you think?" And I say, "It's a full start, you know." So we're up, red card, they're out. Yeah, so there's no full starts allowed for adult events. And they go, but, you know, it's only an open. What does it matter? Okay, look, I'm not trying to pick on you, but my job is to make sure it's fair for the other 7 people who are running with you. And you getting a full start is not fair to them. It's not about penalising you. It's about making sure everybody gets a fair crack of the whip. And a lot of athletes don't see it that way. They think you're picking on them. You know, you're chucking me out of the event. No, I'm making sure that the others in the event have a fair go. Everybody's on the same playing field, you know, and that's the way I look at it. Yeah, so.
Well, as regards being mean, there are times
What
when.
are you pointing at me for?
You
No.
are, you are very mean.
No, there are times when the coaches of certain athletes kick off, and you think, well, if you don't stop, your athlete's going to get DQ'd, right? And I feel bad for the athlete because the athlete's not kicking off. It's the coach that's kicking off and causing all the problems because he's disrupting the competition or warm up for all the other athletes.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to have several conversations. And if you're not the referee, you would then have to call the referee over to sort that out. And you would speak to the referee and say, if he carries on, this athlete needs to be DQ'd for conduct because you can't speak to officials like that. And that's when you do feel mean because after time it's not the athlete's fault, it's their coach.
Yeah, so the rule book sanction for that kind of problem is you DQ the athlete, which is, you know, like the ultimate unfairness, isn't it? But it's the way it has to.
Qualifies it.
Yeah.
So
Doesn't happen very often.
I nearly had to do it though.
We usually chuck the coach out of the meeting. So.
Very, very slick operation then.
Yes.
Huge teamwork. So
It's
how
big.
does it work from, you know, like you're saying, measuring, and then how does that information get all the way to the scoreboard or
Okay,
the screen?
alright.
Have we got?
So for the very high level meetings, they would have a contractor that would supply the scoreboards, the measuring equipment, time clocks, etc. And their EDMs are linked up to the computers that are set up. So once the EDM takes measure, if it's a valid throw, they push a button on the EDM, that sends the measure to the computer, doesn't it? And then the person who's sitting with the volunteer at the computer table just double checks what's on the computer read out appears on the scoreboard, So once they say yeah, fine, the computer person says it's the scoreboard, and that's how. And because that relay then goes through to the announcers or any TV commentators are there, so they can. Their systems are updated almost automatically, aren't they?
Yeah, yeah. So there's usually two contractors, isn't there? There's the one that you just described who provides all the equipment, and then there's one who does all the. There's one who provides the scoring and broadcasters' communication system, so it's got the results in it. So they would set up in advance all the names of all the competitors in the throwing order for throw or jumping order, whatever it might be. And then, as Kevin says, when you take a measure on the, it was basically a theodolite on a tripod that we use to do the measure, and then that, as he says, goes across and then interacts from theirs with the back end communication system, and then that's everywhere instantly. So announcers, scoreboards, whatever else, anybody, all the broadcasters get it on their TV screens. That's at Olympics type meetings. If you go the other end of the spectrum, we write it on a bit of paper. At the end of the meeting, at the end of the event in the meeting, we take it to whoever's doing the scoring or the results, and they look at it and check it off, and then it gets stuck on the wall, and people read it. And that's literally the opposite end of the spectrum. And then there's lots of things in the middle. So
online, aren't they?
One of the young lads in our club has started to develop a number of things. So he's got a kind of an iPad type thing that you can take with you to the event, and you just tap in the score distance, and it is Wi-Fi'd back to another person who's got it and put it on a scoreboard. So the TV I moved for us to sit here, we use with our photo finish equipment to put results up directly. We broadcast straight to the internet, race results and field results, so they're available in seconds that way. So technology is creeping in at the lower end, but it's got to be cheap for clubs and meetings to be affordable. It's fine when there are millions of pounds available for the Olympics, but it's not available for the everyday meeting, is
well,
it?
because another thing, World Athletics want to limit the number of people that are on the infield. So for long jump, you used to have a person that would walk into the pit and put a spike in, which will be read by the EDM. But that no longer happens now. That's all done off-site. They put some tape down, and they have two or three cameras on the long jump pit, and then they take a picture before the person's landed in the pit and after, and then an official's in there to go with the operator to put the first point of breaking the sand. And once they've got the measure, the lights that's normally on the edge of the pit, red light if there's a problem, green light go, because they've got the distance. And the person who's breaking the pit when there's VDM,
get going quick.
Yes.
30 seconds to break a pit and to make it look smooth.
To make it smooth.
No,
More
to
than
make
look
it,
smooth,
no, to
it should
make
be
it
smooth.
You can't do it in 30 seconds when they make a big hole in the pit.
Especially the men.
The men just seem to land in a sand pit, and you've got a big...
It's like a bulldozer landing, isn't
It is. Sand goes everywhere. I mean, we have been absolutely covered from head to foot.
Well,
Oh yeah.
That's hilarious. You
Yeah,
sit there and you just go, woof.
You've got to sit there and take it.
I've remembered that's the other thing I got from the Olympics. First, I was, as I said, I was on the hammer team, but we had to do other things as well. So there was, if I remember, there was no long jump team. No.
There was a long jump team.
There was a long jump team, but because there was two pools, they split the teams, didn't they?
That's it. Yeah, that's it. We had to go and help out because there was parallel pools for the long. Anyway, so people got drafted in to go and help. So I'm sitting there with my rake, ready for the long jump, and the first jump threw up all this sand, went straight down my shirt. So I had a bucket of sand in the top of my shirt, and of course you can't sort of stand up and just release it. You have to kind of get on with it. And anyway, I had sand down me for the entire long jump.
We've all had that. We've had on our head, and the athletes come past and go, sorry.
At least you didn't trip over photographers, because I was on the pit by the track for the heptathlon long jump, and Jess was jumping one close to the stand, and I was raking the pit, and there really wasn't a lot of room, so you had photographers everywhere at the bottom of the pit and getting in the way. So you're told not to walk in the pit when you're raking, but I had no choice because I had nowhere else to go. I was doing the far side of the pit, so I had to get in the pit to help the other guy, Aidan, rake the pit, and it was just crazy and we asked them to move 2 or 3 times, but they would not move. They just huddled around their end of the pit.
You needed to call God.
Oh no.
But that's the difference
He'd have
between.
moved them.
But that's the difference between a big event where you've got cameras, you've got all the cables, and you've got when I was doing I think it was the Paris, World Paris,
Hmm.
and I was spiking. And I spiked Alid's world's best record, British record, and you were standing in between the two big camera lenses that were sort of going like this, and you're thinking, and they're saying, you need to move, and we say, no, I need to be here because you have to see where the shot lands, and because if you miss it by millimetres, they could miss a world record or personal best or whatever. And then you've got they're all trailed, the cables are trailed across the track, and it's just.
Yeah, the things we have to do are quite strange at times. So, I've stood guard on a cameraman because he had his back to the javelin because he was doing the high jump. So he was behind the bed of the high jump, standing on the grass, and the javelin throwers would potentially reach him. Unlikely, but possible. So we had an official standing beside him, looking the other way, so that if something came his way, we'd push him out of the way.
Wow.
So these are the things that you end up doing that are not exactly in the rule book, as things, as jobs to do. So, yeah, it's amazing what you can end up doing.
It's fascinating. So, looking at the comical side, maybe, at the top of anything, you have some eccentrics, don't you? Have some sort of elite. The higher you get, sometimes in any profession, any sport, you get sort of eccentric behaviour, and I just wondered if there were any rituals, or whether you saw anything comical, or characters that really stood out, athletes stood out, and whether they had their little rituals, or.
I think lots of them do.
Johan Blake was one, and Usain Bolt would always chat the person up behind him who's a kit carrier, and they always used to come back smiling because they said, I've been spoken to by Usain Blake, and Blake was there, and it was just like, hang on a minute, and she said, you mean which one? She went, both. She said, because they were in the same race. Blake would come up and give me a little banter, and then because they were both buddies and they both were obviously from Jamaica, but I said, you're getting them muddled up. And she went, no, they both came and I think they gave her also their shoe. One of them gave her shoes afterwards, after he'd finished running, because she was at awe of them, because she kept looking at them, and he'd go up and saying, you can smile, and it was just how they are. And we had an athlete that used to boo at the long jump board.
Yeah,
that's
true. Yeah.
Used
to walk up to it and go boo. And I'm not quite sure why he did it, but he did actually. He did get caught out a couple of times because he would put his foot over or walk past the board, and once it was his minute to do it, that's a foul, and he got flagged a couple of times for not stopping early enough and stepping over the board.
But you have a lot of different athletes do different things. Some people blow their noses and the tissue goes down their sock, and it's really, but they do it all the time. The
people to ask, I guess, are really the cool room people, because they're the ones who see those kind of little rituals in, like always putting your left foot shoe on first, or whatever. We don't get to see much of that,
when I was in the cool room, because being a games maker, I was sometimes in the call room at the Olympics.
What's that cool room?
In the call room, it's where all the athletes gather before the start of their race. So they have like call room 1, so all the athletes are there, all ticked off. Then call room 2, they move over, so then people are checking them as they go to make sure they haven't hidden anything they shouldn't have, or the right size spikes, to make sure the advertising is
make sure they're ready to run, got their numbers on, etc. etc.
I mean,
there's a whole group of other officials doing that as well. And if you don't get to call room on time, you don't get to race.
They have to be there.
So there's a set time.
Yeah, it's an hour before call room 2, and then when they used to have 2 call rooms, and then half an hour before in call room 1. And we had Alid actually turned up in call room 1, and he'd forgotten his throwing leg. How do you forget?
That's easy.
It's massive, and it's all. And he went there and went, oh. And we said, how can you forget your throwing leg?
Well, Dan, when you talked to Julie, asked Julie about going to Finland.
Oh God.
Dan went to Finland to compete, and Julie and Jackie went to watch. And then Julie got a phone call from Dan going, have you left yet? No, not yet. We're not. Could you bring me a bag of shoes?
He left a whole bag of shoes behind.
Deck athletes take for 10 events, they have 8 pairs of shoes because they're different type shoes for different events. And he'd left his bag of shoes behind. Gone all the way to Finland for the meeting and left his bag of shoes behind. So, and then that's pretty much down,
it's amazing
isn't
what
it?
they do leave behind. I mean, being involved with athletes as well that have got to the Olympics and the things they've actually done, and it's, I mean, how can you forget shoes? I don't understand. Or a pole vault, you know, if you're a pole vaulter, I mean, you know, that's one thing, but I mean, pole vaults do go missing anyway on the aircraft because they're a nightmare to try and, I mean, we tried to get James's poles to Spain. We had to end up driving to Spain because the aircraft couldn't
find an aircraft that would take them there because they are long. I mean,
they say, can we saw them in half?
Yeah. Do they unscrew? No. Can we saw them in half? No. Yeah.
There's only a couple of planes that will take them now because the planes have all got these. They're all in like
containerised,
bomb-proof,
which are only and bomb-proof ones. So they're only, I don't know, whatever they are, 6 foot by 6 foot roughly. And of course the poles are 18 feet long. Some of them, so 6
meters.
metres.
They will slide on the top of the containers.
Some of them on some aircraft, but not others.
No. So we've had to drive all the way to Spain to take pole vaults.
Yeah.
So what would be your advice, or maybe you could suggest a pathway for young people that might be interested in becoming an official?
So Jackie did something once a long time ago that I'd like to talk to you about. So for a second or two, so she pointed out to somebody a guy that we all love called Chris Stott, another official, and he was very like bristly. He was very nice, but a bit bristly. Oh, you need to be an hour and a half before you need to do this. And Jackie said, "Don't forget, this is my hobby. I come here because I enjoy it. I don't get paid." And Chris took that away in his head, and another year or so later he said, "You're right, you know, I do this because I want to. You know, I shouldn't be browbeaten by people because I'm 10 minutes late, you know, not 10 minutes late for a start, but, you know, whatever." And a lot of other people have kind of adopted that and understood that actually this is our hobby. We do it for fun.
We don't get paid.
We don't get paid. We got a small stipend for the Olympics, didn't we?
Well,
Something like. But we had. That's true. You didn't get paid a penny. I know. You got free public transport, and that was it. I think.
Oh, and free clothes and
yeah,
fun.
but
for young people coming through, it is fun.
It's a hobby.
It's
you
a
have
hobby.
to look at it as a hobby.
And it's a way of, you just have to contact a local club, and they'll put you, you know, in touch with.
They'll bite your arm off to help.
You know,
because there's
you can do track, you can do timekeeping. So you haven't got to be physically able to do things apart from sit and maybe just use a stopwatch.
Yeah, we have plenty of disabled officials, don't we?
Yeah, and I mean, we've got one of our officials has got like one arm. He is amazing. He manages to do everything. Yeah, Paul.
Yeah.
And he does everything. And you know, if somebody wants to get
Joy's
involved in it,
I mean, I know she's given up now, but
wheelchair,
she's in a wheelchair. And Catherine's in a wheelchair.
But you know, people want to get into it. It is fun.
No, they were field officials. They were both, you know, so not out on the grass because that was a bit more difficult. But they would do other things, wouldn't they?
And they do get to meet a lot of interesting people as well. It's not only just us older officials. There is a lot of young officials out there.
Well, my biggest drawback from 2012 is we haven't had a legacy of keeping and recruiting younger officials, because if someone analysed the top end of the national officials, you're looking at 55 plus, right, is the age span. There are a few people below that, but not many.
Yeah, my guess is the average age is 60 plus.
So from 2012, we should have been trying to recruit young people in to becoming officials, right? And just try and progress them along. So because we need a conveyor belt to replace us, because once we go, who's going to be able to do these events? And without officials, there will be no athletics anywhere.
But it is fun. It is socially. I mean, we enjoy the social side, get together, and even we've had young officials, and they said, "We can't believe how much fun it is," because it is fun. I mean, when we get together.
Well, we make it fun, don't we?
Well, I make it fun. You know, if he starts getting the we just say.
But we do. We try and make it fun.
It's fun. You know, you do get the
But
some officials. Some people don't.
Because when I first started officiating, you had to wear a blazer, light grey trousers, shirt, and a tie. right? Don't matter how hot it was, that's what you had to wear. So I said, right, I don't mind the blazer, the shirt and the trousers, but there is no way I'm wearing a tie, because I wear a tie every day for work. And it was very old boy network. There wasn't a lot of fun when I started, but everyone was kind of
Very
stiff-rodded, didn't have a laugh.
Oh, they did.
And once they moved away from the formal wear and started getting us to wear polo shirts, we started to relax, because we have a good laugh before the event, but during the event we're focused, and at the end of the event we go back into having a bit of lively banter, because what I like is officiating, and if we're staying away from home, then going back in the bar, having a chat about the day and a few drinks with what becomes like an extended family, because you get different people from all sorts of walks of life.
So I think on the note of what you've just said, how important it is, your role, and how athletics wouldn't really be able to take place without officials. I think we'll just draw that to an end, I think, but
Okay.
Absolutely incredible, really, really fascinating.
Oh, can I just finish on one
You
funny
can,
story?
You can, we need a funny story. to
Right,
finish
it was the Paralympics, it was a triple jump, and we had this Brazilian triple jumper, and he was lined up on the he was lined up
I know the story.
I was there, I was on the time clock, I could see it all unfold. So he was lined up on the runway by his guide. His guide went down to just in front of the pit, and he set him off, so I started the clock, and within 2 strides of going past me, he was off the runway, and I'm thinking, oh my God. And I'm looking down at the board, there was a young lad who had the tape in his hand, and his face went, because this 14 stone Brazilian was coming. So he bypassed him, but the guy who was on the takeoff board, no, put his feet round the back of the chair and flipped himself backwards into the other pit, and the guy took off just in front of where Noel was before he flipped backwards and landed outside the pit, and that was quite funny on the last leg, because it did get shown a few times, and there was a picture in one of the national papers the following day of this event.
Of Noel going halfway backwards,
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you so much for
You're welcome.
Pleasure.
to me
Yeah, it was.
and having this interview.
I'd like to-
Incredible.
Let's hope this might encourage a few younger people into the event.
I think it will, and we really appreciate your contribution, definitely. And what you've done for athletics, like you said, and all those dreams and achievements that people can measure, down to having people like you, is fantastic. So thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.